Thanks for coming, everybody. My name's Bob, and we're going to have a little fun today, hopefully, telling a few stories. You know, the idea here is this, that, and I'm sure you all know this, but really effective design and excellence in operations go together. And today is all about that. It's all about how you look at that and ways we can learn things from just looking at the way those two things interface in a destination. So, you know, I think we all could agree that Disney's attention to detail and design is kind of legendary, and they use it, as we all do, to really establish clear place and time. A lot of cases that's outside the real world. So I think Rick's got a great story to kick us off.
Yeah, let me start with just a quick little story. And this one is about a popcorn wagon. And, you know, it's about a popcorn wagon at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. You've probably seen it. It's right inside when you first get into Main Street, USA, turn of the century, Main Street, USA. It's in front of City Hall. When you first go through there it is. There's that popcorn wagon right there. When you first go through the turnstiles at Magic Kingdom, you see above you and in front of you the train station. And then there are two tunnels. There's a tunnel on the right side and a tunnel on the left side that go underneath the train station. When you get to the end of that tunnel, it sort of opens the curtains onto turn of the century Main Street, USA. And this popcorn wagon is right there on your left as you enter. And I was with a group of people at Walt Disney World when I worked there. We were going on a tour. The vice president of the park was giving the tour, and actually the tour was about the theming at the Magic Kingdom. And so we were in a group together, and we walked by this popcorn wagon, and I had to raise my hand and say, hey, just a quick question. This wagon right here, do our guests, do they really want to stop and get popcorn on their way into the park? You know, my vision is that our guests beeline it over to Space Mountain to get in line, or they're going to run to the castle show. It's hard for me to think that a lot of them are thinking, man, I just got to have some popcorn to get my day started. And then consequently, on the exit, it's sort of the same question. Our guests, when they're heading out after a long day, are they really saying to themselves, man, I got to have one more bag of popcorn on my way to my car? Well, anyway, the vice president looked at me and said, well, Rick, you're right. He said, that is the least profitable popcorn wagon that I have in the park. It's not here to make a lot of money. It's here because of the smell. He said that smell of hot, salty, buttery popcorn is the perfect thing to hit your senses as you walk on to turn of the century Main Street, USA.
So great example of hopefully what we're going to play with a little today. Mark, you want to intro everybody?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Great story, Rick. Thank you, audience. You probably should know who these guys are. We've got Bob Allen, founder and chief storytelling officer of IDEAS. And we spun from the Walt Disney World gene pool. We're a brand and experience design company serving global destinations and attractions for almost 25 years now. And also speaking with you, we've got Bob's brother, Rick Allen, almost fully through his lifetime. Rick's opened and operated and been the general manager of just a ridiculous number of Walt Disney World theme parks and resorts. And hang on, Rick. Rick's a career legend in delivery of best ofs in staff training and leadership and operations. And then there's me. I'm Mark Edson. I do partnership and business development for IDEAS, and generally just try to help people deliver the best experience they can within their destinations and have a great time doing it. And also special thanks to executive producer Hannah Bumhofer. Thanks so much, Hannah, for making all this happen, pulling all the strings. So today, this kind of is the Bob and Rick show, and they'll riff for maybe 30, 45 minutes. We'll see how it goes and then answer some questions. So if you've got them, please post them up to chat or just raise your hand and holler at the end. I think it's going to be a bunch of fun. So today we're going to look at some of the ways to assess a destination to assure that you're delivering an optimal guest experience. In our last webinar, we talked about the elements that contribute to delivering what we call destination performance. Bob, you want to give us a quick refresher on that?
Yeah, love to. I think it's always great to reground in that. So destination performance is, a model. We use a lot of models to just take a look at it. And what we found over time is when we would talk to clients, if we walked in the door and said, "Hey, we're really smart, cool, creative guys. Would you like to work with us?" Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. What we did was realize that particularly operators care about results. And so we finally kind of developed this model and said, look, these are not the 6 things, but these are 6 very primary drivers of performance. If you're an attraction owner-operator, a destination owner-operator, if your attendance is going up over time, your length of stay for each visit goes up, your per capita spend increases, your guest satisfaction ratings go up, people come back on a shorter and shorter return cycle. So instead of coming every 12 months, they come every 9 months. And very important nowadays in the days of TripAdvisor and related, that intention to recommend, that notion of the guest going out saying, we had a great time, you should come with us. Those are 6 things that if all those needles are moving up, our argument is you're probably going to be performing pretty well. Certainly financially, but not just financially. What we find is in a destination where these things are clicking along, morale is better, retention is better, the sense of brand is more deeply understood. So we really love to come at every assignment we do, whether it's a park or a science center or a museum or even a hospital, with this kind of model in mind. So this year, we started getting asked by a lot of our clients, well, tell you what, how do we achieve that? How do we achieve this destination performance stuff? We're not new. We're already up. We're running. We're cranking along. But I don't think this is the year for me to do a whole lot of capital investment. Now, frankly, that could be any year. But the answer led us to this new idea we have that we've called the IDEAS Experience Playbook. And so here's kind of the way that works. The notion was to come up with an approach that says, hey, let's look through 2 lenses. Let's look through, as in the popcorn story, and in the next couple we're going to tell you, let's look through, first of all, the lens of intentional design. What are design factors and executed design factors that we think are driving guest behavior? And then what are the operating factors? Right? What are the issues around the actual person-to-person delivery of a branded experience that are really important? So, and that's on the ground by people. So the combination of aesthetics, graphics, palette, adjacency, visual and sensorial intrusions, all those things combined with that personal guest engagement turns out to be the formula for where we stand on the curve of achieving destination performance. When we look at both sets of those things, interestingly, frankly, those are the things that actually get wrapped up inside of what we would call the brand. So really, it's a 3-legged stool. It's design, it's operating, and it's the way the brand is amplified or not amplified by those performance factors. So it turns out, and it would be fair to ask, do you have 19,000 volumes of citable reference? And the answer is no. As Mark mentioned, and Rick and I think, are exemplary of the team that we represent, we have done a fair amount of research and work with some great researchers, but we've also been doing this a long time, as many of you have. So we really have great ingrained, hard lessons learned, frankly, and we've made notes. So the idea is there's 32 factors when we do a playbook analysis that drive all these performance factors. Nicely, they fit into these 6 major categories, right? So, everybody in the room is going to understand, guest interaction, how is your facility looking, ease of use and accessibility. We all know that if we have a great park, but you have to walk 4 miles through the rain to get there from the parking lot, that can put a damper on the guest experience. What's the quality of the experience, and what's the quality of the experience relative to what the expectation is that was set by our marketing? Safety, very, very critical, and perception of safety. And then efficiency. Am I able to get through my day and do that in a way that I feel like I really got value? So those are the 6 categories. What we thought we would do is tell a couple of stories from the field, from recent outings with our new playbook tool, and just sort of illustrate, how this works. So, Rick, I'm going to toss it back to you for one of those stories.
Sure. Great. Yeah, let's start. I want to start with one that's in that guest interaction bucket. So, and specifically, a story about the difference between friendly employees and employees that engage with guests. We were working with, went out and saw a client who, just like all our clients, they want to increase their overall guest rating, that intent to return that's so important in terms of revenue and everything else. And they had a great survey out. They talked to their guests quite frequently, and they asked, how friendly are our employees? And that's a great thing to ask. They drilled down further than that. They had asked about specific behaviors about those guests, what those guests experienced with their employees. Did the employees say please and thank you? Did they use the guest's name, which is wonderful? Did they end an interaction with, is there anything else I can help you with? Those are all great, and they contribute to employees' friendliness. So friendly employees for their survey were high, but they couldn't get that overall guest intent to return needle to move. So our playbook assessment found that their employees were friendly when they were approached, but they had to be approached. They had greeters in key places, and hundreds of guests passed them by, and the employees didn't talk to those guests unless the guest asked them a specific question. And we've found that engagement is a key driver of the valued guest experience and also helps to maximize revenue. Friendliness is only half of the battle. Are the employees approachable? Do they have open body language? Are they talking to other employees while they're on stage, which puts up a barrier for guests? Do they initiate contact? And we can help drill down on that, and we can help to understand why or why not they're doing that. As we all know, everybody on this call, employees are all different. Some are extroverts, and engagement with guests is easy for them and very natural. But introverts, they might need some training and some tools. I will tell you one that I used when I was at Walt Disney World all the time. We had, I'd get a department of 100 people, and we needed to help get them out and learn how to engage with guests. And so I'd divide them up into groups of 20. And I'd get 20 in a room, and I'd look at them and go, all right, guys, we are going to have a contest. Where I'm going to put up a picture of a typical guest. And maybe this guest has a Cubs hat on, and he's wearing a university shirt or something like that. And I'd say, okay, if you saw this guest, I'm going to hit the stopwatch. You got 20 seconds. What are things you could say to interact with this guest? You're going to all do it as a group. I'm going to capture it here with my marker on the flip chart. Ready, go. And they'd start throwing them out. Hey, go Cubs. Right. Okay, cool. I got it. Good. Hey, I love the University of Michigan. That's a great shirt. I got it. Okay. Hey, what's your favorite attraction? Perfect. I've got it. Perfect. Hey, where are you from? Great. Perfect. I've got it. 20 seconds later, you got 16 or 20 things up on that flip chart. And all you got to do is pause and say, folks, that's it. That's all you got to do. And it really gave our teams confidence to know that they could go out there and start to engage with guests. A lot of times we'll find that our employees need to learn to disengage as well. There are tips and tricks for that. Instead of saying, have a nice day, which, in my mind is kind of a B-. You get a little credit for that, but not much. But can you close out with something more personal that shows that you've actually been interested in that engagement with that guest? If an employee just gave directions, let's say, to a show, and instead of saying, have a nice day, can they say, hey, enjoy the show. And by the way, when you're done, come back and tell me how you liked it. Well, I got to tell you, maybe 1 out of 12 will come back, but you can picture somebody might say, you know what, I'm going to swing back by and I'm going to go talk to Steve and tell him I loved the dolphin show. That was really great. Your food and beverage cashiers, when they're cashing out a meal, they can say, have a nice day, but could they say, oh man, you got the chicken sandwich? That's my favorite. You made a great choice. And dads are going to look up and go, see that family? See, yeah, I'm a good lunch picker. I made a great choice. And all of those things, that engagement can increase all of those guest engagement scores, and that doesn't really cost a nickel except for a little bit of training.
Rick, I'll jump on that with a quick other story. We did some work early on for a really, really interesting waterfront resort over in the Gulf, and it was a classic place. It had been there for years, and the honest truth was the guy was redeveloping it, and he had to knock this kind of grand old dame of a building down and rebuild it because it wasn't salvageable. But it had a lot of cachet, and the particular local population was real concerned about it. So, one of the things and this was many years ago, this is more common now, but one of the things we said was, look, we know from research and more from talking to your staff, what's on a guest's mind when they check in is how quick can we get to the beach? Right. And these guests were mostly Northeastern guests, and they would come for a pretty lengthy length of stay. This wasn't a weekend kind of resort. So we said, don't build a front desk. do the front desk functions. You already got the credit card. You know who the guest is, but just don't build the physical barrier, right? Don't put it there. And then we extended that out and says, as long as we're not going to have a front desk, you don't need a lobby. What's a lobby?
Wow.
Build a living room. Encourage guest interaction. Encourage people to hang out. Put really comfortable rocking chairs in there. And there were some raised eyebrows when we laid this up, particularly from the architects. But and I don't think they went whole hog, but I think they met us halfway. And I think it just points out that you can actually create design incentives for really good staff guest engagement.
Yeah, I've got to tell you what that story reminds me of was I was the opening general manager for Disney's Art of Animation Resort, which is a big resort, and for thousands of rooms, and it had a huge front desk. Well, the design idea it wasn't my idea, but was for the first time ever to get rid of that long barrier, just like you talked about. So now we didn't get rid of the front desk, but we created pods, and so you could walk between them to engage with the guest. And I got to tell you, it was the first time we did it, and our cast were scared to death. They loved that barrier. Well, they were afraid people were going to walk around and do things, and we didn't know what. But the truth was, the minute we opened, the guests loved it, and the cast loved it, and that's the way they've done their resorts and rehabs from that point on. It's a great point.
So I'd love to have us move on to another story. This one, and this happens a lot with our playbook work, this one is a case where we found some people behaving really, really well. And we love to call that out too, because when you're doing something right, sometimes you don't notice it. So it's really good to say, you see this? This is really working. Keep doing this. So Rick's got a good one.
Yeah, I love to share it. It's and again, as you said, Bob, every project that we go to, we find elements of incredible success, and that's, as you said, just as important. You may think you're doing something pretty good, but when you get that third-party validation, looks in your eye and goes, you know what, guys, you got something here that you've just got to keep going, and it really helps people know where to put their focus. We went to Florida Aquarium, and we got to walk around and do an assessment out there. Now, you would expect at the Florida Aquarium to see wonderful examples of animal-related shows.
And you will.
And we will, and we did. It was marvelous. That was certainly something that I expected, and it was exactly delivered as promised. But what you might not expect is that the food court was exceptionally clean. And I can tell you, a food court cleanliness is tough. My experience, I was there on a Saturday during spring break at lunchtime. And so they had no bigger bar. Their capacity was probably stretched to the limit. And yet what I saw was wonderful. There were no trays or food on tables at all that guests weren't sitting at. Tables were wiped clean with the right cleanser. Chairs were pushed in, tucked back in after the guest had left by the team there. High chairs were cleaned, wiped off, and put back for the guests to get it. They weren't like scattered all around. The trash cans were all empty and doing exactly what they needed to be available for the guests. And employees were asking guests who were sitting there if they could help them clean tables while, hey, are you finished with this? And they would grab those while they were there. All of that is just excellent. And I can tell you, I've run a dozen food courts at Walt Disney World. I never had one that clean, and so that was really a surprise and great to see. And Mark, I know you were out there too on a different day. You had a similar experience.
Yeah, I went on a different day, and I'll tell you that that mentality, that sentiment is pervasive throughout the entire facility. It is exemplary. Stunning is a great word. Just everywhere we looked, the facility was in phenomenal state of repair, and I'll tell you, it was just great to see. It felt good. It felt to be a guest there. So I'll leave it at that. They should be very proud of their job, the job they do.
I would just knock on again, sort of from the wearing the designer goggles for a sec, just some fundamental things that when you look at this food court operation that resonate, right? And none of these are world beating, oh my gosh, we spent $20 million on that. Windows. The location of this food court is near a wall of windows that open up out onto a great outdoor area at Florida Aquarium. Well, that natural light pouring in the building completely changes the entire mood and sensibility of that food court. Where we have lighting, it's this may sound like a really weird detail, but the color temperature of the lighting has been specifically designed. It's warm, so you don't feel like it's an institutional feeding environment. Think about that term, and that is the term that's used, institutional feeding. Who wants that, right? But this is a warm, inviting, spacious sense that you get being here. Another one is, I call it designed in ease of use. And the idea is, I know automatically where to stand, where to go. I know what the flow is. I don't feel like, oh, wait a minute, do I do this first? Do I order over here and move over? It's all really clear, right? That exactly where I go. And there's this really nice combination, I think, again, really thoughtfully developed between how much is self-service, because to some extent, guests love self-service, particularly if you got a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 7-year-old with you. But on the other hand, you also want to know there's some staff interaction. Nice balance, right? And finally, us designer themey folk can overdo it. And there's nothing worse than going to a food and beverage operation, and the theming is so cutesy on the menu, you have no idea what you're ordering, right?
Yeah.
So this is just right. It's enough theming that you remember you're at an aquarium, but it's not so overbearing that you don't know that you're getting chicken tenders for Johnny. So all those things kind of go together. Again, the intentional set of design with the operating integrity and the cleanliness really make it frankly a delightful break.
Yeah.
You got another one, Rick?
Yeah, let me have one more that I'd love to tell. And this one's actually a Disney story, and it's in that facility and maintenance bucket that we looked at. And I know a lot of people on this call, everybody will know that operators are looking for metrics. When it comes to maintenance, that comes down to how much things are working. So what percent uptime do we have, and what percent downtime do we have? And that works for attractions. Easily, that works with hotels. You can measure, everything in a guest room and public space. Guest room, the AC, how much is it working? And the TV, how much is it working? The lights, how often do you have to replace it? Do you know that your preventative maintenance plans are working? And so you get a metric, and that's nice and easy to use on how good we're doing at maintenance. Well, for a couple of years, I was the general manager at Future World for Epcot, and you can see here's a picture of Test Track here. We had a new theory we wanted to play around with because, I was in charge of operations, so we didn't control as much maintenance, and they did a great job. This didn't have anything to do with them, but we couldn't control that as much. But we wanted to figure out what we could do when it came to mitigating the effect of downtimes. And we knew that no matter how good we were, things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go down. Attractions are going to stop. And in those unavoidable times, you can show your guests you're on top of your game. And that's what we were focused on. Bad example being, have you ever gone into a restroom in a location and the urinal's out of order, and so it's covered up with a big black plastic trash bag? Well, that's awful, right? And then maybe there's a hand scrawled sign next to it that says out of order, the guest would need to know that in a written way that it's out of order. Now, the difference between having a professionally made cover for that urinal or a professionally made sign, that's incalculable. Those are very important. To give options for guests. If there is a service that's out of order, can you put up a nice sign that says, "We apologize, this service is momentarily out of order, but here is the closest place this service is available." Is that something you can put up? So this example that I want to tell you is when I was at Future World, and Test Track is an attraction at Future World. If you haven't been there, it's a fantastic high-speed thrill experience, and you're test driving cars. And you can see in this picture, there's actually right behind that sign that looks like a ramp that's sort of tilted back. That's the ramp that when the cars zoom around inside the attraction, then they come around outside the attraction, and they're going fast, and it's great fun. And sometimes it would stop working. Relatively frequently, it would stop working. So we did all the things we should do. We put up nice signs when it went down. We posted it on our park app to let all the guests in the park know that it was down. And I would put our cast members out in droves at the front of the queue to apologize and to help answer questions of any guests that came up. And those are all good things. But what is the number one thing that our guests that would walk up to that queue would want to know? When is it going to come back up? That's the number one, obviously, that they want to know. And that's a tough, complicated question. It's a complicated attraction. And we didn't really know that answer. So our cast constantly had to say, "We don't know, sir. I'm sorry. We don't know when it's coming back up." But we did sort of know. We kind of knew. In most cases, when Test Track went down, most cases it was because of a familiar issue. And so with those issues, we knew, what it might come. We know it's going to come up in X number of minutes. Let's say for the story, 60 minutes. So we would know. But we were afraid to share that. Our cast were afraid to share that. Because what if they were wrong and they told the guest that it would be 60 minutes and they would come back and plan their day around it? And now you've got a very upset guest and you've got a bad guest situation. So that was tough. So we tried something. We got everybody together and we trained everybody to say, all right, we know that for about half of our downtimes, we mostly know when it's going to be able to come back up. And if it was one of those downtimes, we're going to communicate to everyone that it should be 60 minutes. So don't tell the guests that, but tell them 90 minutes. So we'll pad it a little bit. But the second part was more powerful. We said, and here's a secret. When our attraction, when Test Track comes back up, we run the cars for 10 minutes. That's part of our bringing it back up procedure. We run the cars for 10 minutes. And so they go zooming around that track that you'll see there. And you can hear those cars roaring all over Future World. So when you hear those cars going, come back and see us and we'll get you right on. And I'll tell you, it worked. Our percent downtime, the number of times we were down, didn't change. None of that changed. But the percent of negative guest comments we got about Test Track being down went down 40%. And besides a little bit of training, that didn't cost us a nickel in capital or anything else.
Yeah, it's a great story. And, you talk about the fear factor there too is, staff members want to take care of the guests, but they don't want to get criticized either. So you figured out a great bridge. Look, we could tell these stories all day, and we will if somebody will raise their hand and say, "No, please don't keep telling stories." We have a bunch of them. You probably have a bunch of them too, and we would love to hear some of yours. But maybe I can kind of put a button on what this all has been about. So we've tried to demonstrate that a methodology, this thing we're calling the Experience Design Playbook, that combines the right kind of assessment Number one. So the assessment methodology has to be clean and accurate. Um, Combines that with insightful operating and design experience. You put those two things together, we think we figured out a way to help operators really discover some enhancement opportunities that are straightforward to implement, drive destination performance, and a lot of which, not all, but a lot of which aren't going to start with you're going to need to put in $30 million worth of new capital. And I guess I would parse that a little by saying, so when we look at the 31 key individual components that drive those six broader categories of assessment, um, they're not all of the same weight. And we have, again, using years of experience and kind of going through the research documentation we have from projects we've done, we've been able to come up with a weighting system that really spits out a score that says, okay, look, here is your score. And if it's here, by the main, you're really doing pretty well, and you should expect those destination performance factors to be rising up over time and getting you where you want to go. If you're here, you're probably not doing worse than anybody else. If you're here, you have some real opportunity, and we want to show you not just what to work on, but we want to show you what to work on first, second, third, because you want to get the big rocks in the box first. You want to get the ones that really drive guest behavior squared away as quickly as possible, because that's really where your opportunity is for real quick wins in terms of the way the destination performs. So I think, Mark, that's what we wanted to cover today. Don't know if anybody has any questions on their mind or anything else we can talk about.
Yeah, those are awesome. Mary just offered one up. Thank you, Mary. Can you translate this discussion to membership-based organizations
Mm,
that run monthly events?
isn't that fascinating? The answer is yes. To do that properly, we probably have to think about it a little. But let's just riff a minute. I don't think the criteria are different. They may be nuanced based on the kind of destination it is, but members, and I'll equate that, for instance, in the theme park world, to annual pass holders, right? Frequent flyers, right? Members have an even higher, tougher set of expectations, and they need us to create environments that don't feel one and done to them. So I don't know all the answers. Do I think the methodology applies? Absolutely. It may be adjusted and tweaked for a membership environment, but I think it's probably more important to understand. And by the way, and Rick, you can talk more about this than I can, but this is not something where, okay, we learned these things, we did some stuff, we fixed it, it's all good. This is an ongoing, dynamic, never-ending, you look all the time at these things. And so I would think, again, with membership, higher expectations, lots of repeat attendance, and probably a sharper hawk eye, frankly, on every single thing, so maybe even more important to stay on top of the game. That's my initial response.
I'll throw one out, Bob, to add to that. And Mary's great question. My experience, I spent a lot of time running some Disney Vacation Club properties. And so those are obviously members. And before I got to a DVC, I, was working at regular resorts for years. And boy, I tell you, when I first got to DVC, it hit me right between the eyes, the difference that a member had in terms of expectations compared to a different sort of regular, I guess you'd call it a regular guest. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to. It may very well be. And I remember this story specifically. We had for some reason, we were having some trouble getting our keys to always work all the time. That's awful in a hotel. And so, one guest had that situation where their keys didn't work. And so right away they said, well, I want to talk to the general manager. And of course I said, I told all our cast, said, sure, I'll be happy to talk to him. But I mean, did we do what we normally do? We run keys out there, and we had a process to try to make sure that everything was done. And they said, yeah, no, we did all that. They ended up getting in their room in 3 minutes. And so, in my head, it was kind of, okay, well, I think we did what we were supposed to do. The guest grabbed me, and he's very sincere. And he said, I wanted you to know something. I talk about being a member of the Disney Vacation Club to all my friends ad nauseum. I tell them all the time how great it is, how wonderful it is. I brought these friends to join me here. And when the key didn't work, I was embarrassed I, now they're making fun of me the whole time. And normally a guest would say they were inconvenienced. There are 1,000 things that a key not working is going to do for you, but not embarrassed. And that's a very strong opinion. So I think to your point about you really have to dive deep with a much more surgical level to get down to what are the important things, because they're just maximized in terms of their expectation. I hope that addresses what you might be looking at.
Thanks, Rick. Got one more. This just in. I'm laying it down real time.
We've just so everybody knows, we've ordered Mark some glasses, so don't worry, this will get better. Yeah.
I would like to know how your methodology translates to cultural projects and heritage-based clients. How does your language shift so as to not scare them off with theme park talk? As we all know, heritage cultural clients say, we don't want to Disneyfy our property.
Sure. I mean, first of all, I don't think there's, even within the theme park world, there aren't two destinations that are alike. Not only do we face that with much more culturally authentic experiences, but you face it in, for instance, in the aquarium and science center and zoo world, that it's not about that fantasy piece at all. It's about delivering real science, real learning, the real understanding of, animals, plants, whatever the topic is. So I think the broad answer is you adjust, you certainly adjust the language. You go understand what they're there to do first, and you take that at face value. We want to understand the brand. Who are you? What do you say you're going to do? Why do people come visit you? What was your intention? We want to start and know all that. And then we're going to look at, okay, given that, are you executing well against that goal across these 30 or so touch points of execution? Because if I'm in a culturally driven experience, I'm going to look for different things than I am if I'm, at a regional park, for instance. So I think that's the first step. Is it's not a one size fits all in terms of the thematics and in terms of the storytelling that goes on, but the way that gets done has some commonalities. Engagement is engagement, irrespective of whether we're talking about a cultural experience or a very, very fantasy, experience, a very high-tech experience or a very hands-on experience, right? Cleanliness is cleanliness. Safety is safety. So we can still look at those things and understand how they would manifest in a cultural environment versus something that's a little bit more manufactured. Rick, you got any knock-ons for that?
Yeah, Melody, this may be just because this is me, but in where I think the language is out there now, and particularly in parks, but in hotels too, and other experiences, the high-tech nature that we seem to be heading towards, seems to encourage the theme parks and whatnot to use all that high-tech phrasing and all that stuff. And pretty soon, guests are just staring at their app the whole time, and they have to know I'll make all this, you have to know what a fast pass is, and you have to know what the rules are with all of that, and all of that could scare off people in a much, more detailed way that we don't need to do. And maybe that's what you're talking about. I would imagine you've got clients that say, we don't want a Disney. That's not what we want. And I think the low tech way of making all that work is something that everybody should focus on, and we would be able to help focus on as well.
Just a quick thought about that, as we talk about this a lot. We were talking about it this morning, actually. People will often say, what do you think the trends are? What's going to drive guest engagement, going forward? One of them is, frankly, said sort of bluntly, dialing down the tech and dialing up the touch. People are hungry for human interaction right now. We've been a little isolated by lots of things like, pandemics and technology and just the general pace of life. And we see in guest survey results and just in observation, we see a real premium attached to that heart moment where something happens between people. And in a destination, and I'm going to use the word park in its broadest thought here, but in a destination like the ones we work with and that we're all talking about, there's an environment that sets the stage for that heartfelt moment to occur. Um, so, the more, not in a silly way, but the more we can design opportunities for person-to-person moments, we really think that's going to be valuable. I would go back to the heritage question and say I think that's even more important um, when you're dealing with a cultural immersion. When you know, it isn't enough. I don't want to just see the artwork and hear the music. I'd like to feel like I've actually had an experience. I'd like to be touched. I'd even like to be invited in to, in some way. Could I walk away, well, not in a cheesy way, but could I walk away feeling like, okay, I'm now at least a partial member of that culture, right? That happens between people, way more than it's going to happen with, to quote, John Hench, one of the founders of Walt Disney Imagineering, nobody walks out of the parks whistling the architecture. Um, y- you know,
Right.
um, it's going to happen between people, and we lean way into that when we're looking. It's why we put so much emphasis on that engagement part.
Yeah, those touch points, those experiences are what create the long-term relationship, that bond, and then they become ambassadors for you. Your guests become ambassadors for you out in the marketplace
Well, and we know, I
with
mean, there's
architecture.
millions of stories like this
Yeah,
of
yeah.
of it used to happen at Walt Disney World all the time. You get a guest letter that says, we need to know when Louise is going to be working the dinner shift at
Right.
California Grill because our children love her and we're going to only plan our vacation when we know she's going to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how powerful that is. And and again, I'll go back and it's a bit of a soapbox, I guess, but I'll own it. Um, More than ever now, since there's so much of, you can't see it. I got my phone in my hand, but it's keys out. Since there's so much of the tech going on and it's so ubiquitous, uh, doesn't mean we don't use that, by the way. We use that too. We all should use that. We should make it work for us. But there's so much opportunity to get back to that heartfelt moment. That's going to be more and more important, we think, as we go forward.
Thanks for that question too, Melody. We're running 45 minutes in. Do you have time for one more? We appreciate everybody joining us. You got time for one more, or do you want to wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we've flogged it pretty
Pretty
good.
well flogged it.
Uh,
Good, good.
you know, I
Well,
uh, the I think let me maybe double back to where we started a little bit, since you're inviting. The core thesis, just again, is great designers really have to have an understanding of how a destination is going to operate on every level, and successful operators have to have input into the design and then know how to set their staffs up with systems and protocols and training and training and training so that that design intent can be delivered experientially. You know, it is really great when you have the opportunity to do that on a greenfield basis, meaning we're going to start from scratch, we're going to build a new park. That's awesome. That's great. We all get a few of those in our life, but that's not usually what we're all doing. What we're usually doing is changing the wheels on a moving train and trying not to slow the train down or get our fingers run over. So, that reciprocal dialogue, that interdependence between the great design effort, and the operating effort, and the thing that's kind of in the middle of that as a dotted line is the whole human factors part. I think it's funny. I guess I'll tell one more story a little off topic, but an awful lot of my own learning about how this works, I learned by being a fairly mediocre and badly paid guitar player. What I learned was, there's always going to be somebody with a better lick than yours. There's always going to be somebody who can flat pick faster than you can. The way to make it work is to really, really, really understand your audience. Who's in the bar? Is it the school teachers convention? or or is it power pole lineman from Oklahoma? You know, both deserving of our respect. I'll go all the way saying you'd better fall in love with your audience, at least for the time you're together. And that space is what you want to work in. And if you're willing to take the time to really understand the audience and respect and love them, then you're going to know really clearly, well, that's not the set I'm going to play for the telephone lineman. They're going to want to hear a little Merle Haggard. So I'm good because I'm here to entertain. I'm here for, I'm going to say those guys because this really happened and they were all men. They want to have a couple beers and, laugh a little bit, and that's their bag. Okay. Let me give that gift. Let me give those guys the thing that's going to make the first 2 hours of their evening go really well. I think if we keep that perspective, if we always say, whether it's a new build or you're retrofitting or you're fixing, you can't design guest experiences from the ground up. You have to design them from the guest out, and that has to be more than a platitude. If we live that practice, I think we're always going to be a bit more successful.
So I think that I was going to just add on. Melody asked one more question. We got time for me to take a shot at her quick question. She said, when it's appropriate, she said, I heard a story in relation to Rick's popcorn stand story of an ice cream kiosk in the main Magic Kingdom Castle Plaza. I heard that it's the #1 selling kiosk in all the parks because after the guests have experienced this incredible walk down Main Street, engaging all of their senses, the last sense is taste, and that ice cream is irresistible. Is this a real story? So, #1, I have not heard that story. And #2, could it be true? Man, there are guys that sit around and think about this stuff, and they lock them into windowless rooms and make them, do research to figure out if that is true. So, Melly, I don't know. It might be, and I don't know if that's the #1 selling one, but I will tell you this. I know that it's an old story, but when you go down Main Street, outside the bakery, they pipe the smell from the bakery out to Main Street, and that's a real thing, and that absolutely increases revenue.
Well, the original version of that is on Disneyland's Main Street USA.
Yeah.
When the park opened, on the candy shop, they took a hair dryer and they taped it to a stick, and they took a cookie sheet and poured vanilla extract in it and blew the hair dryer across the vanilla so that it would go out underneath the window, because the smell of vanilla makes people crave candy. I mean, so first of all, Melody, is that a real story? Of course it's a real story. You just told it.
Yeah, right. It certainly is.
It's not only real, it's true. Storytellers always tell you all stories are true as long as the telling lasts. I suspect there's a lot of truth in it. And I suspect we've all, again, you're in this business. All of you have these stories. And I'll just sermonize one more little bit. It's one thing to know the stories. And even be able to tell them. It's another thing to make them real. It's another thing to make those stories come to life and put them into practical use. And I think that's part of what this is. An awful lot of the time, we look at these results from this playbook stuff we do, and you go talk to the client and they go, we know that. We know that. Why aren't we paying attention, right? So some of it's maybe a whole other webinar someday, although I'm not qualified to be in that one, but I'd love to attend it. So, I have a colleague at Harvard who wrote a whole book on what he calls the action gap, right? So here's what we know, and here's how it leads to the right thing to do, and here's doing that thing, and then there's this gap in between. How do you get across that? But I think that's really what it's about. It's part of it is retelling these tales to enough people that they become culture, right? What comes first, culture or stories? My answer is stories. Culture is woven from the fabric of stories. So the more we tell them, even if they're aspirational, right? The more we tell them, the more they're likely to be reflected in behavior as part of a cultural norm.
It's a great line. Woven from stories. Well, I think we are kind of wrapping up here. Thank you all very much for joining us. We look forward to having you join us for the next one. We'll post this video up to the ideasorlando.com website one day really soon. And we will look forward to connecting in with you all once again. Here's contact info for all of us. You can always find us at w.ideasorlando.com too.
And the next one, Mark, that's the one, the title I think is Kangaroos. What are they really? Right? Isn't that the one we're doing? Appreciate everybody being here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was a blast.
Thank you all.